Hello, everyone. Hey, welcome to podcast 122. Shawn, again, remind everybody, all of our four listeners, why we are podcast 122.
122 comes from James chapter 1, verse 22, which is, do not just be hearers of the word and deceive yourselves, but be doers of the word.
Yes, absolutely. How can we deceive ourselves? By just listening to the word?
Well, because that's us thinking that all I need to do is listen to facts.
Yeah.
I just need to know the information and I am good to go.
Head knowledge, nothing like it.
Nothing like it at all. But the big issue is we're given the word of God so that we can transform.
So our heart can be changed.
Yes, so that we can become like Christ.
Yeah. Now, head knowledge is important.
Oh yeah, it's part of it.
That's where it begins, right?
Yeah.
We with our head, with our beautiful mind that God gave us, we read the word, we dissect it, we understand it, but then it can only really be applied to our heart when we apply it.
Right. Apply it, practice it, and change your life around it.
Exactly.
Because that's how God wants us to live. That's why He gave us the word. He said this is the best way to live.
Exactly. Yeah. Man, I've been thinking lately that we do have the answers, right? We do. Well, God has given us the answers.
Yes.
To pretty much every malady that's out there in our culture today. Can you think of one thing that our culture is struggling with that God doesn't have an answer for? Just ponder that for like literally 5 seconds.
No, can't think of anything in 5 seconds.
That wasn't 5 seconds. It was like 2.
What?
No, you didn't even give it 5.
1,000, 2, 1,000.
No, I'll count. You think.
Okay, hold on.
Boom. What?
Nope, still got nothing.
Seriously.
Yeah, it takes about 5 seconds for me to even get warm.
Okay. So but if we took more than 5, people are going to push the channel.
They're
like,
totally going to.
I'm going to push those little parallel lines that says pause, and then they're going off somewhere else.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So seriously, every malady that's out there in our culture, God has an answer for.
That's right.
And in His Word. You know, the Bible is so comprehensive. It is so detailed. It gives us everything we need for life and holiness and living the kind of life that God wants us to live. A life of fulfillment, a life of joy, a life of purpose, mission, a life of hope. It truly is an amazing book.
It's like it's almost tailored to us.
Yeah.
It's like it's almost given on purpose to human beings so that they can know the best way to live.
Yeah. Right. Exactly right.
Isn't that a coincidence?
Yep. You know, when I was, I'm probably going to tell my age here, but back in the day, I'll just say the day, not my day. Back in the day.
You never know the day.
Right. There were people there were traveling salespeople.
Yeah.
And they sold a lot of things. Like traveling salespeople, they sold vacuums. You probably don't remember that.
Not at all.
They sold shoe shine kits. But there were traveling encyclopedia dudes, and these dudes
I've heard of
would
them.
travel around and they would sell encyclopedias.
Yeah.
Like Encyclopedia Britannica, and there's this huge volume set. I literally remember my parents like entertaining this idea of maybe buying a set.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there cross-legged in their living room. I'm like, all these books, and this guy's like showing what's in them, and I'm like, this is super cool.
Yeah.
Like everything you would ever want to know is in this like 200 volume. Or it wasn't 200, I guess, but as a kid, it seemed like it was 200 volumes of all these books. But you know what? All we need is one. All we need is one, and it's the Bible. And the Bible doesn't give us everything we want necessarily to know,
right?
But it gives us everything that we
need.
We need.
That's right.
To know in order to live a life of holiness and righteousness, a life of love, a life of purpose, a life of hope, and it gives us all that we need to know God, to know ourselves, and to know the past, but most importantly, I think too, to know the future.
That's right.
That God has for us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what gives us hope. Because if we just look in the past and look at what we've done and how we've fallen short and things like that, it can get discouraging. But when we look to the future and we see the future we have with God and the options we have, because we've been given a new life in Christ. And when we have that new life, then the future looks really good, because it's not desolate, it's not discouraging, it's not all the losses that we have occurred, but it's God taking those things that maybe we've fallen short in and using them to glorify himself, to transform us, and to give us a future that is ultimately spending eternity with him in the kingdom of God.
Right. And it's not even going through this life like, oh, woe is me, I can't wait to get out of this life and into this future with God. It's so glorious. But it's also giving us joy and purpose right now today, and hope no matter what.
Right.
No matter what's going on in our life, we can have joy and purpose and hope.
Yeah, because our eternity that God promises us really starts now. Our life with Christ starts our new existence, our eternity with God.
Yep.
And that starts here,
right,
on earth.
Yep. And it really is all about perspective.
That's right.
Right. Even through trials and tribulations, it's all about perspective.
Yeah.
When things are going great, it's all about perspective. Right. When things are going great, it's the perspective of, hey, it won't always be this way.
Right.
When things are going bad, the perspective of, hey, it won't always be this way. But in our culture today, let's talk a little bit about our culture, because I've heard like, wow, our culture is really horrible. It's bad. Things are horrible. And it hasn't always been that way, but if you look at history, culture, right, has not always been great.
Right. Yeah. And we tend not to look at the culture in which the followers of Jesus started the huge mission, because we think, oh, well, Jesus was there, so everything was good and culture was great. And yeah, there were some people who wanted to put him to death, but, for the most part, everybody else was good.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you look at Roman culture and you look at the things that were going on all around the Roman world, you'll see that it really looks a lot like our world today.
Yep. And even within the Jewish culture, which certainly Jesus was raised, and most of his public ministry was done in the context of a Jewish audience within the Jewish culture. Even within that, there's maybe this mindset of, oh, everything was great, everything was good.
Right.
There were Jews, they had the law, but what we don't understand is that within that culture, the religious leaders had strayed from the law, and they had begun to rely mostly on oral tradition. And what is oral tradition?
Well, oral tradition those are the things that they made up as they went along.
Wait a minute. So they made them up?
Well, interestingly enough,
what?
They had the word, but then they felt like they needed to explain the word. And so, honor the Sabbath. What does that mean?
Right.
And so they were like, oh, well, maybe we need to put rules to it so people understand what it means.
Oh, so they honor the Sabbath, they'd say, which is legitimate, like law. Like it's a legitimate requirement that God has said, hey, back then, hey, honor the Sabbath, because God certainly rested on the seventh day, and we should rest on the seventh day. So that was legit.
Yeah.
But are you telling me that they tried to explain it, and in their explanation, they may have gone a little too far?
Yes, because in their explanation then, they added more rules, and rules which were actually a burden to the culture, and really a lot of times didn't even fit in with what was real. And Jesus kind of highlighted those when he went through his teachings. But for example, like there was a huge debate on what work meant. You don't work on the Sabbath. Well, that's interesting. So does that mean you don't do your job? Or does it mean you can't even make supper? Or does it mean that you can't even open a door?
Can you even get out of bed?
Right. What?
Like, wait a minute. Wow.
Yeah.
Let's think about that for a second.
Totally.
A whole day, once a week.
Yep.
We should reinstitute that.
Oh my gosh.
Like one day, hey folks, guess what? On the 7th day, and you pick it, you stay in bed all day.
Totally.
And you can have snack food.
Yep.
Can you watch TV? What if it's pre-recorded the day before?
Well, and that's a great question because, again,
I don't know. My mind's racing right now. I'm like,
well, and that's the thing is
Prepare
your
for
mind
the
racing. Is that work?
Prepare for the Sabbath.
Yeah.
You prepare for it, but prepare snacks in advance.
Right.
Everything's right there by your bed.
Totally.
So you're like, yep, you turn off your alarm. You turn off everything. Yes, you have a Sabbath cart or a Sabbath something.
And there's Sabbath servants who are exempt from the law because they really aren't Jews. But
but you're making them work. I don't think that works.
Oh, that doesn't work?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Ooh, yes, if it's a different day, though.
Oh, yeah?
Hey, I'll serve you on this day, and you can serve me on that. I think we've strayed way too far right now.
Way too
sorry,
far.
I'm going to reel us back in.
But that's a good point. I mean, that's a good point because, keep the Sabbath holy. That was a thing. It's true. And how true God rested on the seventh day, we as his creation should rest on the seventh day.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. So from what I've heard, and I think this is probably legit. So when Jesus, at the time of Jesus' ministry, the religious leaders, they had invented, hundreds of extra rules and regulations which they had instituted to try to maybe explain the law, but they didn't explain it. They expanded on it. And like you said, it had become a burden, but people just lived like, no, this is it. This is who we are. And so when Jesus, when he sat down, when he preached the Sermon on the Mount, when he talked to them on the Sermon on the Mount, which, man, I would love to have been there on that day, like fly on the wall, like hours. He kind of expanded. And a lot of what he expounded on was this oral tradition, right?
Yep.
Because he began a lot of what he said. You've heard it said.
Right.
You've heard it said. Usually not it is written. Right?
Right.
Because he said, well, you've heard it said, and he talked about, well, you've heard it said this, but I tell you.
Yep.
And what are some of the things he talked about? Well, he talked about murder, right? When he talked about murder, right? He said, hey, you've heard that it said that people long ago don't commit murder, right? And everybody was like, yeah, that's true.
That's right. We believe that.
Don't murder.
Don't do it.
Yeah. But at the time, it was okay to, hold a grudge.
Yep.
At the time, because again, these expanded on the law. Yeah, don't kill anyone, but you can treat someone like garbage if you want.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, and Jesus, because he walked and he lived in this culture for so many years, he knew what was going on. So he said, you've heard it said, and then you would say, but I say to you. And so, yes, don't murder, but then Jesus cranks it up a notch.
Yeah.
And it's like when we look at our culture and the situation we're in, there are murders every day. And what would Jesus say? Yeah, do not murder. But then he would say, and I say to you, do not hate your brother.
Right.
Because hating your brother is just like murdering your brother.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And he says, like, do not be angry with your brother. You know what I mean? Like, and I think in this context and the language there, literally meaning, don't be angry to where you lose control of your own emotions.
Right.
You know what I mean? Don't be angry to where I hate you. And then he goes on to say, he uses the word raka, right?
Yep.
Which certainly means you fool, you're empty-headed.
Yeah.
You're an idiot. I mean,
it's like shaming somebody, saying that there is something wrong with you.
Yeah, you're useless.
That's right.
You're so dumb, you're useless.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, when you look at people, I can't think of one person that I've ever looked at that wasn't created in the image of God.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And when Jesus said, don't be angry, I mean, that is the root. That is the root of so many things, right? It's not just murder, but like you were talking about, Raka, you fool. It's talking about demeaning somebody. It's talking about shaming somebody, condemning other people. And when we get angry to the point of not being able to control it, we're at the point where anything can happen. And a lot of times we think, well, I would never murder. Okay. It's possible, but there are a lot of people in prison who said that they would never murder.
Yeah. Yeah. I've it's interesting. I hear people who maybe have a different kind of political persuasion maybe than me, or you listen to people and they say, oh my gosh, the people on the right or left, you choose, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They're just idiots. They're so dumb. They just don't get it. And they say this with gritted teeth and their fingers, their fists clenched, and I'm like, wow. I mean, do you really think that about someone?
Right.
Yep. Well, and I think that's really, Jesus is getting at the heart of that matter, saying, hold on, someone can have a different opinion than you do.
Right.
And we can have different opinions, right? But let's not condemn someone, because that's really what it is.
Right.
And Jesus is saying, hey, don't condemn someone to this state of worthlessness. But we do that.
Right. And it's like you said before, Genesis 1:1. Well, and let's even get to 26 and 27. Each of us created in the image of God. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that we're all here for a purpose. We're all here on purpose. There's nobody that we can say Raka to, that we can say, you fool, you are worthless, you have no reason to be on this earth.
Yeah.
Because everybody does.
Yep.
And we have to acknowledge that if we're going to see the big picture. So like you said, when people of different political persuasions argue with each other and say, I can't believe they are so blah, 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 blah. It's like, do you not realize who you're talking to?
Yeah.
Or talking about?
Yeah. And we see it even today on the news.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
Right now. You see signs, right? Death to Israel. So is that person committing murder in the eyes of Jesus? No, it's a little bit. I'm putting you on the spot right now, Shawn. Is that person committing murder?
Well, what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, even if you are angry with somebody else, even if you hate somebody else, that is as bad as committing murder.
Yeah.
So the answer is, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if the person holding that sign literally wants an Israeli person to die because they're Israeli, yeah, they're in danger. Now, again, I know you and I, we would never condemn anyone. That's not our job.
Nope.
Right? It's Christ's job to judge someone to condemnation. But I tell you, like they're in hot water.
Right.
It may not be boiling, I don't know, but it's hot.
Yeah.
And check our hearts. Check your heart. Death to Israel. Death to America. I mean, who would have thought that we would hear that in our own country, in our own state of Michigan? Like, death to America. Wow. Do you really mean that? Do you want Americans to die?
Right.
Because we're American.
Yeah, exactly.
It's ludicrous.
Yeah.
And there's something wrong with that person's heart.
Right.
It's a hard issue.
Yeah, and that's huge. That's important to point out that it is a hard issue because it is sin and going to the point of viewing somebody else through the Satan's glasses, really.
Yep.
Because Satan hates us. He wants to destroy us.
Yeah.
And so when he gets us and leads us to the point where we are angry, where we hate, we're doing exactly what he wants us to do.
Right, exactly.
And it doesn't matter what political opinion you have. It doesn't matter what nation you live in. When we say that about other people, that is putting us on a bad road. The seeds of anger and hate and murder have been planted.
Yeah.
And you can see it when it comes out through our language like that.
And I think that people want to put their cause above Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And can I bring it home a little bit?
Let's do it.
It happens in the church.
Yes.
When in front of Planned Parenthood, demonstrations, or people who talk even in the church about the LGBTQ issue, sometimes we can go overboard and we can take the cause, which hey, I'm the cause is good, right? We should be against abortion. We should be certainly pro-life. We should be a pro-marriage. A biblical marriage, right?
Yeah.
But and the cause is important. But when we put the person, right? When the attack is on the person, that's where we as the church really we get in hot water,
right?
And so how do you draw that line? Like how can you still stand for the right cause, but still love the person? Hey, if you have any value in what we're saying. If it rings true in any way, shape, or form, just go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, and we'd appreciate that. Like us, if you don't mind. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. The thing that always gets me is when I think about other people, and getting that attitude of they make me angry and I hate them and their cause, and I think about, what should God really be saying about me? Without Jesus, I don't deserve anything. I deserve hell. I am in rebellion to God, and He has more than enough right to bring His wrath upon me. I don't deserve it, and so when I start there and think about who I am and the position I'm in, and think about the gift that I've been given through grace and the love of God, then I think about other parts of His creation. And we were all created differently. We all have different opinions. And that is how it is supposed to be. And so when we think about it like that, and are there people who have different opinions than we do? Yes. Are some of the opinions totally different than a follower of Jesus might have? Totally. But does God say, if you have this opinion, you should burn in the fires of hell?
Right.
No, He doesn't. He doesn't. And if He doesn't say it, then I shouldn't say it.
Yeah.
So if we are outside an abortion clinic and we disagree with abortion, what is going to help change somebody's heart? Is it going to be somebody picketing? Is it going to be somebody bombing the abortion clinic?
Yeah, no.
Or killing the abortion doctor? No. Jesus showed us that to change hearts and minds, we need to love.
Right. And Paul makes that clear too when he always combines faith and love together. Like genuine faith in God and genuine faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ also brings about genuine love, not only for God and not only for fellow Christians, but for people.
Yes.
Right. So, and Paul always had this great way of presenting the truth in love. And so did Jesus.
Right.
Right. I mean, Jesus, the woman at the well, he confronted the woman at the well.
Yes.
But he didn't do it in hate. He brought the truth, but he did it in love.
Right.
So much so that her life was changed, and she was this herald of the truth in her own village. And he stayed there for a couple of days and talked about the gospel. And combining, we can't separate faith, right? Faith in the true gospel, and in the Bible, without love. You can't separate the two. So, is it okay to picket? Sure. I think it's okay to hold up a sign, but certainly when we do confront people, when we do talk to people, make sure that we genuinely are doing it out of love for them.
Right.
Right. And seeing them as people created in the image of God.
Yeah.
And people who God loves and genuinely cares about. And so we need to present the truth always in love. Because if we don't, then we're putting the cause above the people.
That's right. And ultimately, Jesus came to bring the truth, to bring peace, to help us have an opportunity to come back into a right relationship with God. And so on our picket signs, if we put death to the abortionists or death to people who give an abortion, we're not giving people an opportunity to come back into a right relationship with God. We are condemning them.
Right.
And so if we want to give them an opportunity to know the love and the freedom of Christ, we have to come alongside people.
Right. Yeah.
We have to love like Christ loves, sacrificially.
Right. And another thing Jesus talked about, which I think is right in the same line of this, is he talked about the law of retaliation. So oftentimes when we're talking with, say, people outside the church about issues, maybe it's marriage, it's biblical marriage, or the abortion issue, we want to bring the argument, and we want to argue the same way they do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they'll hurl insults, and so we think, wait a minute, they insulted me, so I can insult them.
Right.
They yelled at me, I can yell at them because I have a right to do that. Like they started it. How you know? So you know, we begin to argue at playground. We use playground rules,
right?
Like, well, they started it, so they did it first, so I can do it back. And so, do we ever have that right, Shawn? To retaliate? Do we ever have the right to treat people the way that they treat us?
Yeah, and that's the issue, because no, we don't. Again, God should be treating us totally differently. But because he sent his son to die for us so that we could have a right relationship with God, we are met with grace and mercy and love. And so when our culture and other people, they come at us with the tools of our culture, we can't lose our Christianity and say, oh, nope, now we're going to play by your rules.
No, but we do. We end up yelling, losing control, saying things we shouldn't say.
Totally.
And then that anger builds up, and then we're in warm water. Yeah. You know?
And we say, well, they deserved it. No, I'm just doing what they did.
Yeah, no. See, as children of God, we give up that right to respond the way that people treat us.
That's right.
But we take on the responsibility of being Christ to people. So when Jesus said, hey, you've heard that it's said, interesting, right? You've heard it said, not written.
That's right.
You've heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And again, it's the law of retaliation. And that's what they lived under. Certainly that was Rome. It was Rome's law.
Yep.
And it's what the Jews had come to practice at that time as well.
Right.
Right? But Jesus said, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. In other words, don't fight, don't quarrel in the same way as the evil person is quarreling with you.
That's right.
But he says, and if anyone slaps your right cheek, hey, turn the other cheek. If someone insults you, right, you don't have the right to insult them back. In fact, we're supposed to take it. We take the insult. And he goes on to talk about if anyone sues you. So if anyone wants to treat you in a worldly way, right, we don't have the right to respond the same way. We don't. Yeah. Now, we can certainly defend ourselves, but that's not even the issue that Jesus is getting at.
Right.
He's saying now, because we're children of God and we've experienced grace, we've experienced forgiveness, we've experienced what it means to have Christ in our lives. Now we are the ambassadors, and we have now the right and the privilege and the responsibility to respond to people like Christ would.
Right.
In love, forgiveness, grace. We listen. We listen twice as hard as we talk. We seek to understand people and then respond to them in a way that Christ would. Because guess what? That is really going to win the battle.
Right. And that's so countercultural to what we think, to what we believe. Our humanness, our sinful nature wants to rise up and fight the battle because we don't want to be disrespected. We think we have to fight for God. But when we do act like Jesus, Craig, and we do allow people to treat us like that, but then respond in love, what does that ultimately do? What does that ultimately do to somebody else's heart and mind and worldview?
Yeah. It crumbles it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It says, wow, there's a bigger power going on here. There's something bigger going on. And look at Jesus's example. Look what he went through for us.
Yeah.
Look how he was insulted, what he went through, and he took it.
Yeah.
And he was humble even to the cross.
Yeah.
And so, in Sermon on the Mount, after he talks about eye for an eye, then he goes right into talking about loving your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard it said, love your enemies, right?
Yeah.
Or love your neighbor. And he said, you've heard it said to love your neighbor and to hate your enemy.
Right.
He says, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So I wonder how many of us as Christians truly love our enemies, truly love those who don't agree with us, who are living actively rebellious against God. Do we truly love those people?
Right.
Because if we're going to reach people for Christ, we have to do that.
Oh my gosh.
Love's got to come first. And I'm not saying, and neither are you, like Rob Bell, love wins. Let's just love people, and then everything's going to be okay. No, we love them enough to earn their trust, to gain an ear, so that we can tell them the truth, but more importantly, so that they can see the truth lived out in our life.
Right. Because I always have to go back. What is the purpose? Why does Jesus say this? What is his ultimate goal? And he's not just telling us to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, his ultimate goal on the cross was to sacrifice himself so that we could have a right relationship with God. So what is his ultimate goal with saying, pray for those who persecute you? Well, clearly, it's not so that you get to take on more abuse and more punishment. That's not the end game. The end game is that these people who are handing out the abuse at that point see that your love and grace and mercy is greater than any anger and hate that they can dish out. And you are willing, because you believe in Jesus Christ, you are willing to sacrifice yourself for them, just as Christ sacrificed himself for us in love.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it how Jesus talks about it when he says, if you just love those who love you, what good is that?
Right.
Everybody does that.
Yeah.
Anybody can do that. In fact, he even says, and sorry, tax collectors, they get such a bad rap.
Oh, yeah.
Back then and even today.
Yeah.
Like, hey, let's talk about the IRS. Those guys are evil. We hate the IRS. Wait, how come no one pickets the IRS?
Right.
We should.
Yeah.
Oh, down with the IRS.
That's right. We're not suggesting that at all.
We need to
In fact, the IRS is one of our sponsors.
Reform the IRS. Yes.
And thank you, IRS, for being one of our sponsors today.
Yeah, we defund the. Ooh, I like it. Defund the IRS. Yeah. Anyway,
That's awesome.
So Jesus said, he goes, hey, you've heard it, love those who love you. He says, even tax collectors. So he's saying, even like the worst of the worst in our culture, right? Even they can do that.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. He says, and even they can do that. So he said, but we're called, right, to love those who don't love us,
right,
who are even actively in rebellion against the church, against Christ. We're called to love. And, here at Haven, the last couple of years, we've talked about engaging our culture. We've tried to equip our people with basic apologetic skills, right? Understanding and not just what we know, but why we believe what we believe. And that's super important, right? I mean, we've spent, you and I have, we've written a couple of Bible studies. We are excited about Engage. We think it's so important. But Engage is worthless if we don't do it in love.
That's right.
If we don't do it for the right reasons and have the right motives for it. It's not just to speak truth and thinking, oh, that truth is going to change someone's life. It's always the truth in love. It matters how we act when we present this truth.
That's right.
Right?
Yep. Because if we're doing it with a attitude of, I'm going to show you that I'm right. And that's the whole goal, is to show you that I am right and that I can prove that you're wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the love of Jesus. We're trying to show people the love of Jesus. So we need to do it humbly. We need to do it with love and with the end goal of somebody having a interaction that is Christ-like, that is loving, graceful, and merciful.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. We talk about, outreach. We go door to door. We're talking about invite, all these opportunities. And Jesus said, Sermon on the Mount, he says, hey, if you greet those that only greet you, that's not, he's like, it's kind of worthless.
Yeah.
He said, even pagans do that.
Right.
Right. So he's saying, greet those who may not greet you. And that word greet literally means reach out.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting? Like even Jesus saying, hey, reach out to those who may not reach out to you. Wow.
That is interesting.
That's right. And it is easy to, like, if you're walking down the street or someone's like, or you're a crowded place, or even, you're at a restaurant or something. If someone's nice to you, you're going, hey, if someone greets you, you're going to greet them.
Right.
But are we greeting people who are frowning, who are maybe who are grumpy face?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who or look mean.
Right.
You know what I mean? Who are bald and have a goatee and look kind of, like, ooh, I don't want to talk to that guy.
They're kind of scary.
Yeah, or have really short hair with a long goatee.
Yeah, that is
and
even
tall,
scarier.
like intimidating, intimidatingly tall.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What in the world?
Yeah, no one's going to greet that
Nobody
person.
is.
But they should. We should.
Uh-huh.
That's what he's saying. Greet everybody. Love everyone.
Yeah. And again, it's Jesus saying, you've heard it said. You've heard what the culture says. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm telling you. You've heard what the religious leaders who are just in it for the position of power, this is what they said. Now this is what I'm telling you. This is what me, the Son of God, the Messiah, is telling you to do. And in fact, and this is the best part, this is what I love about Jesus, is not only that he told us what to do, but he showed us how to do it.
Oh, modeled it exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did he say the right things, Jesus did the right things.
Yeah. And as we go through our culture today, Craig, like you said, Sermon on the Mount, that needs to happen today just like it did back in that day.
Yep.
And it's so relevant.
Yeah.
Because, we have heard it said, if somebody goes off on you on Facebook, you have the freedom to go off on them.
Nope.
Jesus is saying, well, you've heard it said that that's right, but I say to you, you're supposed to love somebody.
Respond in love.
Yeah.
Respond in grace.
You're supposed to show mercy.
That's right. While we were still sinners, that means while we were actively rebelling against God, Scripture says Christ died for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
While I was still living an active life of rebellion against God, God still had his hands reached out to me in grace and love. And was saying, Craig, even though you hate me and you're living a life of hate against me, I am still here for you.
That's right.
I still love you. I still died for you.
Yeah.
And we need to have that perspective when we're talking to people. And we opened our session here today with saying, hey, podcast 122, James, don't just merely listen to the word and thereby deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Jesus closed his Sermon on the Mount with these words. He said, therefore, anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like the wise man.
Yeah, that's right.
And the wise man, how does the wise man build? What is the wise man builds his house of faith, his life of faith on the rock, Jesus Christ, not on the sand. So if we listen to the word and we don't practice it, it's like we've built our life of faith on sand. Mm-hmm. It's not very stable.
No.
But if we build our life of faith and we believe what Jesus said, and then we put it into practice, we're building our life of faith upon the rock, solid, firm. When storms come, right? When storms come, then we are going to be able to withstand, right, those storms that come our way.
Totally. Yeah. And that's again, the huge reason why we're doing this, the huge takeaway is we're not just going through the Bible and quoting it and talking about it. We, brothers and sisters, are trying to put it into practice as well.
That's right. So
as we leave this podcast, know that what we've heard in the Word today and what we/you study in the Word every day, we/you are putting it into the practice.
Yeah, and it's not that we're perfect either.
No,
like we don't perfectly do
right.
this. So why not just pick one thing today? Like if you've heard it, if you've hung out with us this long, just pick one thing that you can do today or this week that puts your faith into practice. Whether you want to reach out to someone, call someone, respond differently, just pick one thing in your faith that you are going to put into practice. One thing that might show the genuine love of Christ to someone who maybe hasn't felt it ever,
right.
Or maybe it's been a long time.
Yeah. And that one act, that could change some person's life, but it'll definitely change your life.
That's right.
Because once we start practicing, then we become more and more like Christ.
And listen, it's just one thing.
Yeah.
What if every Christian today in the world did just one thing? Mm-hmm. I think our world might stop spinning.
Yeah.
Like, woo, or our culture might just go, wow, nothing bad happened in the world today. What happened on the news? No.
Well, if every follower of Jesus did it, I mean, that's half the people in the world. Well, theoretically, that's what the statisticians say.
Don't believe that. Yeah.
But if everybody who calls himself a follower of Jesus did that, the impact that we would make on the world would be unbelievable.
That's right. Yep. Just one thing today.
Yeah.
That's it. That's not a big ask, is it?
No.
So do you have that one thing?
Yep. I'm doing it.
I think I do too. Yep. If I don't, I'll get it when we hang up here. All right. Yeah. Hey, thanks for joining us so much. We so appreciate you hanging out with us for the last, 30 or 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. And may God bless you today as you practice that one thing. God bless you.